Good morning and warm welcome to Manipal. Getting back from the very busy schedule of your internship and a small break in between, and you're back. Thank you for getting on right time, but there are many people left to come. So we are starting our second year or third semester. So we have Dr. Chari to deliver the keynote address of this August gathering. This topic is emerging shifts in the geopolitics, advantage India. So I'm not wasting any time. I welcome Dr. Chari and requesting him to deliver the speech. Thank you.
Actually, this is a welcome address, or you can say something like that. The word used was keynote address. Keynote address is a huge thing. So it is just some sort of a welcome address. Since you have all been here for the last 1 full year, you are not new to the subject. So we just was wondering what we could do, probably to assess the past year and what we would be doing in the next whole year. So how we can sort of make an assessment of the next year, what all we can do, what we can study. So an overview, we can say at the moment. So it's an overview of the geopolitical situation. And as we all know, those of you who play tennis, there is a term in tennis called advantage so and so. Correct? So they have penalty corner in football. The penalty corner is an advantage given to one team for the mistakes or errors or whatever it is of the other team. Same thing with advantage. So advantage India is not an accrued interest. Economic terms, what we call accrued interest. So you have interest for the next year, which you can book this year in your accounts, but you cannot use it because you will get an interest, but next year. It's called accrued interest. But it's a very risky term. Suppose the markets go down, you don't get interest next year. But of course, we are not going into the economic details. Accounts, those who have done accounts and audit will probably know the fact how to treat accrued interest. So this is called what we call the advantage. So two aspects we are looking at: the geopolitical shift and advantage. So when we say geopolitical shift, we all know about geographical shift. I mean, those of you who have done geography would know about the tectonic plates. So the tectonic plates are forever shifting. That's what they say. Eons and eons of years have gone by. We don't know. There is a theory that the whole universe was one, and then slowly there were tectonic plates which started moving, so they drifted apart, and then once it drifts, the total circumference is then limited. So where else can it drift? If it is an open sky, the outer space, it's endless. It can drift anywhere. But as far as the globe is concerned, the perimeter is defined. So it cannot drift anywhere else. So when it starts drifting from one area, it goes to the other side, and there is another tectonic plate there. It collides with that tectonic plate. That is how earthquakes occur. Okay? So this shifting of tectonic plates, they call it shifting. In politics also, there is a shift. Till day before yesterday, Chief Minister of Bihar was in one group. He shifted from NDA to UPA, whatever it is. So that is shifting in politics. So we take shifting of tectonic plates from geography and shifting in politics. We mix these two chemicals. In geopolitics, it is geopolitical shift. So unlike tectonic plates is a natural formation, the geopolitical shift is man-made to a very, very large extent. So this geopolitical shift, the changes, is what we have to understand. It's a constant. They believe that there was a time when people had forgotten about geopolitics. From the old days of theory of international relations, till Samuel Huntington wrote about the clash of civilizations, nobody thought of geopolitics. That's what they say. Of course, that's a topic for research by itself, the changes in geopolitical aspect. But this is a man-made shift. Man-made in the sense made by circumstances, created by circumstances. Unlike an earthquake, which is a natural phenomenon, the geopolitical shift need not necessarily be a natural phenomenon. There can be very rare examples of a natural phenomenon causing a geopolitical shift. But maybe we don't know. But even then, there is an element of nature in it, like the Mohenjo-daro Harappa civilization. That was the oldest civilization. There was an earthquake, everything was lost. And it was the valley of the dead. In ancient Sindhi language, Dora means valley, and people who are dead. This Mohen means dead. So Mohenjo-daro, that is the etymology case. So that shift, natural tectonic shift, wiped out a whole civilization and something new came out. But that is progress for so many years, and what we see today, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and all these things, is a different story. So the natural phenomenon causing a geopolitical shift is also there, but we won't go into those details. All that comes when you are actually doing a research on geopolitical shift. But as far as our subject is concerned, we need not go to that kind of an extent. So what we have to understand is the nature of geopolitical shift. So when it comes to geopolitical shift, we take, let us say, a period of 100 to 150 years. In these 150 years, what kind of geopolitical shifts have taken place and how it has affected the conduct of countries? For example, we have what we call if at all we can begin from say World War I. World War I was a geopolitical shift. That was a happening. Something happened and the World War began. World War I, it progressed for some time, ended. Who won, who lost, these historic events. But the outcome of the World War I was the formation of League of Nations. So that was the incident that happened. The geopolitical shift took place. From the end of World War I and establishment of the League of Nations, the next phase started. The next phase was the end of World War I, the beginning of World War II. So you see a clear shift in geopolitics. It did not limit itself to war. War in itself was an incident, like tectonic plates coming together and there is an earthquake. Earthquake has an epicenter. geopolitical shifts also have an epicenter. The epicenter was World War I was different. The epicenter of World War II was different. After the earthquake, the epicenter is the place which is affected the most. But there are peripheral areas. If you see the map of earthquake, they will always point out circles. So from the epicenter, so much of kilometers was affected. Then this was affected, this was affected. If there is an earthquake in Afghanistan, Delhi also feels it. That is how we measure on the Richter scale. The intensity of the earthquake also resonates with the area to which the effect goes or the wave goes. But that is something taking place below the earth. But above the earth, on the surface of the earth, it leaves a lot of problems like destruction of property. Somewhere the mountain comes up, somewhere the mountain goes down. So many things happen. We know about all those things. And then people die. And then it has effect on the economy. If the markets are closed, shut, everything happens. So it's a huge happening. It has effect on the human living conditions, dwelling, economy, how people deal with one another, so many things. Same thing happens with the geopolitical shift. So when we look at Second World War, the epicenter is okay there, but it leaves an effect on a large number of areas. Even those countries which are not part of the war also get affected because they are interconnected with areas and zones and regions and countries with which they have a deal. So this effect which takes place between the countries is what we call the geopolitical shift. So the Second World War was the next shift that took place. Naturally, League of Nations could not prevent a war, so League of Nations got obliterated. Then in the place of League of Nations, what happened? United Nations came. So United Nations tried to foment some idea that you have to prevent wars and the effect of war. So this geopolitical shift created a sort of an understanding between nations that we will have to negotiate for and prevent. Now, if what takes place, there are the places that are affected the most. Places which are prone to conflict, which in geopolitical terms we call it flashpoints. So there are flashpoints. Like in the case of earthquake, what we call a seismic zone. Himalaya is considered to be a seismic zone. It will always be prone to earthquake. And there is a very, very interesting report. I don't know, I'm not a student of geography, so someone who is student of geography can probably throw more light on this. It seems in the last about 2000 years, there is one place in India where there has not been a single case of earthquake. And that is Goa, very close to where we are. We don't know the reason. So if any student is from Goa, you should be happy about it. Or not very happy about it, I don't know. But there are seismic zones. Similarly, in the case of geopolitics also, wherever geopolitical shift takes place, some flashpoints get affected. And then there are other areas which develop. So the second shift created what we can call the idea of pacifism. So the pacifists thought that this is the time when we will have to create some sort of a union, some sort of an idea on the basis of which there can be a freedom, democracy, and all these things came up. So many things. I'm not going into the details because in the theory part you would have studied at least all this stuff. So I'm not going into it. But then came a long period of the third shift. The third shift was a much longer period of Cold War. So this third shift of Cold War affected many more countries. And then came the whole idea of not just pacifism, but also another term was Atlanticism. So pacifism, Atlanticism versus USSR, the then USSR. But USSR was not just one country. USSR represented an idea, represented a kind of Eurasian structure. We'll come to the Eurasian structure part of it later. Because between Atlanticism and Eurasian structure, there is a Eurocentrism also. So in this period of Cold War, all these ideas came up. So the whole idea of regions, Atlanticism as a regional framework, pacifism as a regional framework, Eurocentrism as a regional framework, it all came up. And Eurasia as a regional framework. We have studied in the theory part how Mahan said that whoever controls Eurasia controls the world and all those things. I mean, so many theories are there, so I'm not going into the theoretical part of it, we already done it. So, but now the practical part of the theory we can visualize when we come to the top subject of geopolitical shift. So this shifts kept on taking place. And then the end of the Cold War. End of the Cold War resulted in a very major geopolitical shift. What was the major geopolitical shift? What happened? Disintegration of the USSR. So this disintegration, unlike League of Nations and on the debris of the League of Nations, United Nations came up. In this case, the disintegration of USSR resulted in a number of independent countries. We know all those things, so I'm not going into that detail. But that also gave another idea. It was not just disintegration of USSR. USSR, it was Russia, it became USSR, then it again became Russia. If you look into the 500 years of history of Russia, so many things have happened once again. They've been going back and forth on a number of permutations and combinations. So what was USSR was reduced to Russia. Now, if you carefully see the geopolitical shift, we come to the current subject of Russia-Ukraine conflict. That is another geopolitical shift that is taking place. What does it signify? Most important aspect that it signifies is it's too early to say that Russia is going back to the days of USSR. Too early to say. USSR, if you look at the map, it's a huge area. It's not going back to the days of USSR, but it is certainly going back to the days of Neo-Eurasianism. So in the 90s, this Neo-Eurasianism idea started. Very, very incidentally, all of you should try and download one speech, and not exactly a speech, but it's an article. The title of the article is "A New Integration Project for Eurasia." That is the title of the article. It was published in Izvestia on 3rd October 2011. 2011. The whole idea of Neo-Eurasianism started sometime in 2009 or 10. Like the idea of Indo-Pacific, there is not a particular date on which the whole idea started. It was a nebulous idea. But from 2009 onwards, in fact, in the 90s also, this whole idea came up. Neo-Eurasianism came up in that time also. But it was not very pronounced, in fact. So what was happening was what they said was Eurasianism can be defined as an ideology which affirms that Russia and its margins, when you say margins, quote unquote, former Soviet Union, occupy a medium position between Europe and Asia, and their specific features have to do with their culture being a mix born of the fusion of Slavic and Turco-Muslim peoples. Why this is important? Connect this idea of Eurasianism with what is happening now. You will understand the linkages with the shifts. It is not just Russia invading Ukraine. Behind the scenes, another major aspect is taking place, and that shift is China, Russia, Turkey, Iran axis. This axis becomes very important. So now, and I forgot to tell you one thing, why I want you to read this new integration project of Eurasia, the future in the making. That is the title of the article, which was published in the Russian paper called Izvestia. And this article was written by Vladimir Putin. Now remember, Vladimir Putin was the chief of KGB. So like so many other institutions, organizations, every country has an organization which thinks in futuristic programs. They say in Russia, KGB thinks of the futuristics. And as chief of KGB, you are not chief of KGB at that time. He had a vision. He was not happy with the situation of USSR. So when geopolitical shifts take place, there are good and bad effects. The good was that USSR was disintegrated, or the bad was that. The other side, the man who was not happy with that started thinking in terms of a different structure. And in 2011, he wrote this article saying, USSR is not over. So the whole idea of Eurasia and Eurasianism can again be revived in a different manner so that we are able to tackle the menace of the Western world, which talks in terms of three aspects: Pacificism, Eurocentrism, and Atlanticism. Now, shift to another incident, China factor. Now, when all these things are happening, till about say 2005, 2006, 2009, the rise of China was happening. But there was lethargy, or what we can call a strategic lethargy on the part of the US to recognize the fact that China is rising. But by 2011-12, the rise of China was a pronounced aspect of the next phase of geopolitical shift. And rise of China did not take place on its own. Within, outside China, what was happening is one aspect of it. But within China, like Putin was a former chief of KGB, and he had his own ideas of not only USSR, Russia, also about Asia, also about Eurasia, and also about Atlanticism. He devised certain ideas and plans, strategy, tactics to be implemented. What he did, whether it took place, whether it will succeed, we don't know. The Russia-Ukraine conflict also should be seen in the light of what Putin wrote in 2011. So we have to remember all these facts. And they have a correlation. Similarly, in the case of China, externally so many things are happening. China was at once, they were trying to connect with the outside world. They were working on connecting with the institutional framework that, quote unquote, what they said was the creation of the West. They were never happy with IMF, but they became part of IMF. They joined the World Bank. Why? Because they knew that in their ultimate plan, whatever they have to do, these are all the steps they will have to take. So externally, certain things are happening. Internally, certain things are happening. So there was one gentleman in China who had a larger vision, like the 500 years of Russia. China can talk in terms of 5,000 years of history. So during 5,000 years of history, there have been many ups and downs, many going forth and coming back. So this is the time when China's graph has to go up. So he started planning, an internal planning. That was the time of Xi Jinping. 2015 announcement of BRI, we all know. But BRI, there is again, like Putin's article, there is an article by Xi Jinping. The translation is available. That he talks in terms of engaging with Asia and Europe. The same terms. He doesn't say Eurasia, he says Asia and Europe. And revive the very famous term that he used, the Silk Route. So he brought a narrative back to China's economic engagement with Asia and Europe. He didn't mention Atlanticism, he didn't mention USA, he didn't mention the Western world. These are all archaic words. But he used a very typical word, Asia and Europe. Why Asia and Europe? The same idea which Putin was working, Eurasia. So the Neo-Eurasianism was translated into action by China in the form of Belt and Road Initiative. And to side by side, along with this, I won't go into the details of how he managed the internal situation, but it's very interesting. What he did as far as the internal situation is concerned was the political consolidation was the establishment of a Central National Security Commission. He introduced what we call the Central National Security Commission, CNSC. By 2013, it was established. The CNSC seemingly empowered Xi Jinping, who was put in charge of the new body. He became the head of the new body. Very incidentally, Xi Jinping is the only person, only ruler of China who wears 3 hats. Even Mao did not wear those 3 hats. Mao was chairman of the Communist Party. In those days, chairman was the top position. Nowadays, Secretary General is the top position. They have abolished the word chairman. So Chinese Communist Party doesn't have the post of chairman at all. That is that is what you call the respect they are showing to Mao by saying he was the first chairman and he will be the last chairman. After Mao, no chairman. They made it secretly. Chairman Mao was also the political head of China. Xi Jinping is the political head, he is the Secretary General of the party, he is the top post, and he is also the head of the army. Mao was not head of the army. Mao had huge problems with PLA. Of course, Xi Jinping also had a lot of problems with PLA, but we will not come to that. We all know about how Mao. There was a time when PLA was so strong that they wanted to challenge Mao's position. They literally challenged Mao. But then, of course, Mao was a strategist, so he said, well, if you challenge me, I can also challenge, but let us not fight over all this. Let us be friends. After all, we are working for a great China, so why should we quarrel and then nothing happens out of this? We went out and negotiate. So we will have a negotiated settlement. Whatever you want to take, whatever I want to take. But we work together. A negotiated settlement was to be arrived. So they had a meeting. 7 generals of PLA were supposed to meet, and Mao was supposed to meet them. Right? When the generals arrived, next morning, about a few hours before the meeting, all of them were executed mercilessly. Very incidentally, the place which was supposed to hold this meeting, the place where they were executed, was Wuhan. Very incidental. Wuhan has a great history, in fact. So this CNSC gave Xi Jinping great powers. And why I want to mention the CNSC is I will not go into the details of CNSC, but Xi Jinping realized that I will have to have a total control over the PLA. I will have to have total control over the political establishment, and I will have to have total control over the party. So these 3 power centers in China came under one person. So now he can freely execute the idea, his own idea of Neo-Eurasianism. This idea of Neo-Eurasianism, look at the parallels. Both Russia and China, who fell apart, they were both communists, but they did not agree with communism, their variety of communism. They became 2 different entities. They did not cooperate on a number of issues, but their ideas of Eurocentrism and Neo-Eurasianism was the same. So now what is happening? There is a conflict in Ukraine, and a similar simmering situation is evolving in the next place is Taiwan. So China-Taiwan conflict, Russia-Ukraine conflict on the one side. And both the conflicts, these are 2 epicenters of geopolitical shift. And this effect is going to be felt in the Western world. And the last tool of Atlanticism. Atlanticism is an idea, but to implement that idea, Neo-Eurasianism is an idea. To implement that, Xi Jinping started talking in terms of BRI. He started talking in terms of creating a new Eurasian axis. Atlanticism was an idea, and it was implemented through an institution. What was that? NATO. NATO is the last surviving instrument of Atlanticism. Now, what is the problem with NATO? has NATO been able to achieve its aims vis-a-vis Ukraine? No. We don't know about it, but the general answer can be no. So this is a serious problem as far as NATO is concerned. So what is happening is these shifts are challenging the relevance and validity of Atlanticism. So this political shift, geopolitical shift which is taking place in the two hemispheres, is it going to be the end of Atlanticism? If so, what will be the effect of the end of Atlanticism on the other countries? A, countries which are aligned with NATO. B, countries which are aligned with Eurocentrism. And C, countries which are not aligned with these but not opposed to these. Like India is not aligned with Eurocentrism, but we are not part of Europe. We are not aligned with NATO, but we are not part. We are not against NATO, but we are not part of NATO. So what is going to be the effect? And that is where we come to advantage India. Is it going to be of any advantage to us? We talk in terms of, if you look at the other aspect of this whole shifts that has taken place from World War I to China-Taiwan conflict, there is a constant shift in movement between, let us say, a multilateralism under the canopy of UN, from there to bilateralism, US on the one side, USSR on the one side, disintegration of USSR, we talk in terms of unilateralism, and then from unilateralism again we are talking in terms of multilateralism. So, what benefits did we get because of bilateralism? What benefits did we get because of unilateralism? What benefits we can derive out of multilateralism? When these geopolitical shifts are taking place, these geopolitical shifts will keep on taking place, right? The tectonic plates which keep on moving, these shifts will also keep on moving. They will go and emerge, one will be over, next will start. So it will keep on going. Now, it will damage us, but it will also provide us with accrued interest. How do we take advantage of it? Can we really take advantage of it? So if you look at it, what are the follow? A, these shifts, either because of war or otherwise. Because if there is a war, the economy is disturbed. But a major shift that took place or an incident was the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. So not a war, but it practically ruined the world economy. So it's not necessarily that the shift should always be a war. Like, a calamity need not necessarily be an earthquake. It could be anything else. But whenever there is a shift, there is a disturbance. So coronavirus is also part of this. Whether it was engineered or not engineered, it was a natural phenomena. All those things can be different. I mean, there is always a theory that it was part of the biological war. So it is a non-conventional warfare, in a way. So we look at it from the point of view of strategic thinking, a non-conventional warfare. So it had its own effect on the economy. So now what is it going to be? How it is going to span out? So can we take advantage of the war? Can we take advantage of the disruptions? What all has been disrupted? The economy is disrupted. Regional balance is disrupted. Here, the relationship with different countries is disrupted. And naturally, when there is a war or there is a preparation for war, there is an arms race. So here again, we see there is an arms race. There was an arms race during World War I. There was a similar arms race during World War II. There was an arms race between US and USSR during the Cold War. And even now there is an arms race going on. So I give you the websites to give you details of the arms race. I will not go into those details. So on the one hand, an emerging arms race. On the other hand, economic fallout, huge economic fallout. Third was a total disruption of the supply chain mechanism. Third, and another thing was a recalibration of the relationship with countries. But there are other advantages also. With all these disadvantages, there are advantages. When there is an arms race, how do we benefit? We don't become part of the arms race, but can we benefit out of it? There are 6 countries which want our aircraft, better aircraft. Vietnam and Philippines, they are interested in BrahMos missile. Vietnam is interested in BrahMos missile. Now, BrahMos missile is a joint venture between India and Russia. So there was a time when 20% of the missile was Indian and 80% was Russian. Today it is 70-30 almost. So it's a technological progress as far as India is concerned. So can we increase that progress? Today we buy S-400 from Russia, but can there be a time when we will not fall into the arms race mechanism, but be able to develop our own military technology? So this is one aspect where there is an advantage. Similarly, in the case of economy, the world economy is disrupted. Fine. For example, the semiconductor business. Now, what will be the fallout of China-Taiwan conflict? The most important fallout is going to be the semiconductor industry. Now, Taiwan accounts for nearly 70% of the semiconductor industry. But 90% of that 70% is imported to China, exported to China. So whatever China makes use of that semiconductor, again, nearly 80% of that export is to US. So in January 2022, US President called a meeting of all the US industries, a number of US industries. And we told the industry this, that a time will come, should come, when 60% of the semiconductor business is in, it should be able to cater to 60% of the semiconductor. What is the investment that you need? Then the question of Taiwan came up. There is a White House document on this meeting and whatever was decided. So when it came to Taiwan, they said we will see to it that Taiwan is able to protect itself. As far as the conflict is coming. Now imagine a situation where nearly 90% of Taiwan's industry, semiconductor industry, shifts to the US. And China is able to occupy the geography of Taiwan. Now what happens? By occupying the geography of Taiwan, what advantage does China get? They don't get the advantage of industry. So a small geography is attached to the mainland. Of course, there are other power posturing and other things are there in geopolitics. But the economic advantage does not go to China. The economic advantage goes to US. Here, we have got nearly 17 industries in India. They are heavily invested in semiconductor business. And they are all almost blue chip companies. So this is what we call advantage. Can we develop our technological prowess to an extent? We are able to maximize our our advantage as far as one particular industry is concerned. Then comes the idea of supply chain mechanism. It's a total disruption of the supply chain mechanism. Can we introduce a system wherein the supply chain mechanism can be? Then comes the supremacy of US dollar. We have already started doing trade in Indian rupees. Correct? Reserve Bank notification, if you see, the details are all available. There are some problems. This is not the first time that we are doing trade under the Indian rupee mechanism. In 2012, India and Iran signed an agreement on rupee trade. It worked out for some time, but it didn't work out for long. So even if there are sanctions, we can work on this. There were sanctions on Iran, so we had to resort to this. And we circumvented problem. Similarly, we can work out. So we are also now changing to all these things. Ever since the dollar gold parity was discontinued in 1971, since then, the world has moved a long way from the basket of currency situations. So what advantage does it accrue to us now? Can the rupee be strengthened and made a tradable value as far as the rest of the currencies are concerned? How do we do it? Should it be a euro model, or should it be an independent model, or should it be a combination of all these models, or it should be on the lines of ruble trade? These are all different aspects to which an economist can go. But there is an area of advantage here. So economic follow, it has problems, but it has advantage. Supply chain mechanism, it is followed, it is arms race, it is followed, it is advantage. Our bilateral and multilateral things with other countries, there are problems, but there can be. We have to start re-looking South Asia, Far East, Southeast Asia, and also our extended neighborhood, not only on the maritime extended neighborhood, but also the continental shelf, especially Central Asia. So we will have to look at these areas and look at the problems and also the advantages that it accrues. As I said in the beginning, like in sports, there is an advantage, but that advantage doesn't fall. It is not an easy advantage. You have to work for it. So you have to strategize and benefit out of it. So there is the geopolitical shift is a constant phenomenon. This geopolitical shift creates huge disturbance. But this huge disturbance also poses certain advantages. How strong we are and how prepared we are, security-wise, strategy-wise, take those advantages or convert those challenges into opportunities. This is what we have to think. I was just trying to figure out certain ideas that came to my mind. Since we're all students of the second year, we already gone through all these factors. Now, nothing new that I have told you, but we can work on these ideas, and I would personally benefit, the department will also benefit if all of you start thinking in these terms, come out with your own ideas on these subjects, and we can evolve a totally new paradigm as far as geopolitical shifts are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a very broad picture just given to the audience and very good narration. And I'm sure many of you can pick up many things and develop as your own teams and features. So we thank you for that elaborate lecture.